Welcome to another episode of Carib Money Report, the business magazine show covering the region. I'm Kimberly Ramkalawan. This week we head to Brazil, where the Carbon Development Bank held its Board of Governors meeting. Carib Money Report brings you a recap of all that was discussed and the partnerships built. While our in the news features another carbon summit taking place in Brazil and the deliberations arising from CARICOM's 60th COTED meeting on the U.S. tariffs. Staying in South America, our This Week in History segment goes back to Guyana's reform of banking laws in 1986 affecting the way banks established and grew its business. It's a packed show ahead coming up in just a few. We jump straight into the CDB's meeting, where its recently appointed President Daniel Best welcomed those gathered and shared the importance of multilateralism at the current juncture the region finds itself in the globe today.
Multilateralism is fraying. Inequality is deepening. Climate shocks are escalating. The global development model is under intense strain. For small states like the Caribbean, progress now feels precarious. We are asked to stretch scarce resources, absorb shocks we did not cause, and operate within systems never designed with us in mind. And yet, we persist. We prevail.
The opening also saw a call for central banks to put their collective effort toward mobilizing developmental funding to fortify the region against much of the disasters experienced across by its borrowing member countries in recent years.
The bank has committed itself to intensifying its resource mobilization efforts. The Special Development Fund Program, the largest of the bank's partnerships, has been replenished at a record level. Still, more resources mobilization will be needed, since the bank's existing level of capital will constrain its lending ability during the prospective strategic period. Therefore, a general capital increase will have to be part of our conversation going forward. Connecting the moving parts of development planning, financing, and implementation will take some effort from all of us.
Painting a picture of reality for the region was the IMF's Deputy Managing Director and former Jamaican Finance Minister Dr. Nigel Clarke, who in giving this year's William G. Demas Memorial Lecture, titled The Carbon Challenge, Fostering Growth and Resilience Amidst Global Uncertainty, shared that it was the Caribbean region that had suffered a decline in trajectory growth in recent years.
To start, we know that uncertainty imposes huge costs. With complex modern supply chains and changing bilateral tariff rates, planning becomes extraordinarily difficult. Tariffs will impact economic growth, but will do so differently across countries. But no nation is immune. The IMF's most significant downgrades to growth are concentrated in countries affected the most by recent trade measures. Low-income countries face the added challenge of falling aid flows as donor countries reprioritize resources to deal with domestic concerns.
To this, he referred to host country Brazil as an example of the things to do to provide that financial buffer against external financial shocks.
Brazil, in their federal treasury management, they retain up to 10% of GDP in cash. You heard what I said? Their treasury at any point in time has up to 10% of GDP in cash as a buffer. Because having experienced the historical disturbances economically, that has been a feature of their history, they said, no, we are going to design our policies to take control of our circumstances. So we can't find ourselves in a position where there's some disruption overseas. It's amplified in Brazil. We cannot go to the market for financing. So how we're going to deal with it is that we're going to self-insure with this large fiscal buffer. Should we be doing, or what should the Caribbean be doing? I'm not recommended by any means that Caribbean countries should retain cash levels of that. That is Brazil's particular policy response. But what I'm saying is that resilience and stability are essential foundations, layers without which not much more can be achieved. So that to me is one of the principal lessons.
Part of the conference focused on ways in which project implementation can be fast-tracked following the release of funds from the CDB. However, how to get the necessary approvals, certain checkboxes need to be ticked off. One panelist suggested moving forward with e-procurement as a means of fast-forwarding this process.
We have to leverage digital transformation. And to me, this means going straight to e-procurement. We've taken a baby step into e-procurement where we're now allowing e-submissions. It's catching on, more contractors are using it. But we have to take e-procurement to a different level to goods, works, and service contracts where the software and artificial intelligence can turn these evaluation processes around very quickly.
Project delays can also be hampered by other factors, such as lack in data-driven targets and poorly done procurement practices, something to which Dr. Wayne Henry suggested the CDB rectify through its own education courses for BMCs.
Because of the expertise in the region, because of the knowledge over the years, you could establish a center of excellence where you offer certification programs in things like results-based management. You have on-demand webinars. You treat with procurement issues. You draw lessons learned through the region. You interface with development partners to host and help co-host, product delivery. You would have, in a number of cases, best practice tools. You develop a hub and to become that knowledge hub, that knowledge base, where you develop a pool of experienced, qualified project management specialists that can serve the region. You can have persons coming from different jurisdictions to take programs and to carry back to their own country and implement.
These are just some of the challenges President Daniel Best sees as fixable through capacity building among civil servants charged with project management and procurement practices.
We will invest in capacity in our borrowing member countries where the gaps are real, where the capacity gaps are real. And I was just speaking at a meeting of our Board of Governors where I spoke to my experience working in government. And we have excellent public servants across the region. But the capacity, what we are asking many of our public servants to do is completely untenable. Completely. And I experienced it firsthand. As I remember telling Isaac, while I was over there and we would talk frequently, I've been called a lot of things in my life, but lazy is not one of them. And I felt like I was being a bottleneck to moving things in government, just because of how many things come at our civil servants. So we need to look at how we treat with capacity. And we will expand results-based approaches where delivery earns disbursements.
The gathering in Brazil could not have gone without discussing the upcoming COP30, carded for also taking place in Belém later this year. And while President Best shared the CDB's agenda to launch another fund for climate resilience in the region, he gave his take on what is needed when it really comes to climate finance.
So what we're going to do while we still can't get funds from GCF in a timely manner, struggling to capitalize FRLD, the solution is to set up another fund. The other point we're going to be focusing on as a Caribbean region is the importance of focusing on adaptation. And again, mitigation, funds, resources for mitigation are important. I'm not suggesting in any way that they are not important. So we will be advocating for increased access to affordable climate financing for adaptation. And as a matter of fact, when they say affordable, grant resources are needed. And I'm sure they asked my fellow development practitioners from the Caribbean who attend COP, why do you keep going? Like, why do you keep doing this? Why would you keep going back to COP? Because, well, clearly they're not listening to you. Clearly they're not listening to us. We're becoming more and more invisible. And my response to that is, well, if not me, who? If not us, who? And if not now, when? Because not going and not raising our voices is not a solution. Look, we don't have in the Caribbean, and I need to say this, in the Caribbean we don't have a plan B. We don't have a plan B in the Caribbean. There is a reality where we don't exist.
Other discussions were had at this year's meeting, including the traits of a successful fintech system in the region.
Recognize that a successful fintech agenda can help the region provide financial services at a cheaper cost and with greater access for our populations. In this way, fintech will help to build an ecosystem where many more can participate and all can benefit. The rapid and extensive adoption of digital technologies alongside increased connectivity is driving the development of fintech in the global economy. In the Caribbean, central banks are already integrating digital payments with platforms such as the Bahamas Sand Dollar, Barbados M-Money, Jamaica Jamdex, and the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank's Dcash, generating a lot of activity. CDB has actively lent support to this digital transformation in partnership with the International Finance Corporation.
ECCB Governor Timothy Antoine highlighted the recent successful testing of CAP's CARICOM payment and settlement system as the latest game changer for trade in the region.
Real-time, low-cost, cross-border in local currencies. The settlement is, when they did the proof of concept, was about within 20 seconds. I'm not going into the details of how it works, but essentially, if I'm sending money from Eastern Caribbean, from St. Kitts, where I'm based, to Barbados, I send EC dollars. I'm sending to you, Ramnara, you will get it in Barbados dollars. Behind the scenes, there will be a net settlement in US dollars between the two central banks and with PAPS acting as the settlement agent. So that's behind the scenes. But you are not dealing with any foreign exchange issues. You don't have to pay wire transfers and all of these costly arrangements that we have now. So think of that, what that could do for our region in terms of trade, small businesses.
And while the region has led the world in a number of digital currencies implemented, the ECCB governor reminded them it did not come without its fair share of hurdles.
I will tell you, we spent a lot of time focused on financial integrity risk. So that's anti-money laundering, financing of terrorism, AML-CFT protocols. As a central bank and the supervisor of AML-CFT, we had to make sure we took care of that risk. And frankly, we did not spend enough time on marketing early. We did later. And by the time we really got the marketing going, we were ready to close the pilot. But there is a lesson there. We also have to deal with cultural issues. There are persons in our region who still prefer to have physical cash. There are persons who worry that these digital instruments means the tax man is on their doorstep. There are persons who worry that Big Brother is probably watching. There are persons who worry that this could be the mark of the beast, speaking of people of faith. All of those cultural barriers and issues we've had to overcome. And I'm a man of faith, unashamed. So, it is not simply enough to build it. You have to educate around it. And in doing so, you have to take care of safeguards like cybersecurity. Because as you try to build trust, T-R-U-S-T, in the use of these digital payments, like Dcash, you have to make sure you protect people so that you do not undermine the trust that you're trying to build to get people to use it more and more. But I believe the future is very clear. People will ultimately choose their channels of payment based on cost and convenience.
The conference would wrap up with CDB President outlining his vision for rebirth in the region through comprehensive policies implemented.
Through our rebirth mission, we are advancing institutional excellence as a foundation for lasting impact. We are not standing still. We are evolving strategically, systematically, and purposefully. We are sharpening our focus, reforming our internal systems, accelerating disbursement and implementation to deliver on our development mandate with greater speed and precision. Our drive toward implementation excellence is grounded in evidence. The findings of our baseline implementation study underscored both the barriers and opportunities for the bank and our member countries. We are taking these lessons seriously.
The CDB tackling some cultural changes in the way a Caribbean region sees a changing financial world. We take a break now. When we return, we recap some of the other major happenings in the region.
We want you to advertise with us. Join us as the premier business magazine and news outlet covering the Caribbean. Contact us today at 868-783-5094.
Welcome back. The CDB conference was not the only regional meeting in Brazil this week, as several leaders joined in with President Lula for the signing onto agreements targeting poverty. CDB governors meeting weren't the only meeting in Brazil with regional leaders this week, as its president Lula da Silva hosted the Brazil Caribbean Summit, where those present joined a global alliance against hunger and poverty and signed on to cooperation pacts. Representing the region, current CARICOM chairman, Barbados Prime Minister Mia Mottley, praised the Brazilian government for the initiative in its effort to involve the international community in the fight against hunger and extreme poverty. She declared Brazil's global leadership on these issues is reflected in our sustainable development goals and continues to inspire us. The alliance was launched by Brazil in November last year during the G20 Leaders Summit in Rio de Janeiro, bringing over 150 members with a view to expanding global efforts to eradicate hunger and poverty in the world. In his speech, Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva pointed out that the countries have made progress in the debate on climate change and that Brazil and CARICOM states will take a declaration with common positions to COP30 to be held in Belém in November. In referring to the region's most vulnerable states to the effects of global warming, he shared his plans to demand emission reduction as well as proper funding for mitigation, adaptation, and compensation for loss and damage at this year's meeting. He also offered his country's services to the region in the area of energy transition and the decarbonization of energy systems, as it has extensive experience in biofuels and wind and solar energy. The summit is also said to have included a signing to a deal on air services with Barbados and Suriname, aimed at providing greater legal security for air operations between the nations, boosting trade and tourism, while a transfer of $5 million was made to the Caribbean Development Fund for financing projects in the region. The CAF, Development Bank of Latin America and the Caribbean Development Bank, CDB, signed a landmark Memorandum of Understanding MOU that will strengthen their long-standing partnership and provide increased financing for development across the Caribbean. The signing took place on the margins of the 55th annual meeting of the CDB Board of Governors in Brasilia, Brazil, between Antonio Silveira, CAF's Vice President for Private Sector, and Dr. Isaac Solomon, CDB's Vice President of Operations. The MOU formalizes areas of collaboration between the two regional institutions related to development project financing, technical assistance, research and policy dialogue, and capacity building initiatives, to name a few. The MOU also establishes a framework for coordinated support in times of crisis, such as in response to natural disasters or economic shocks, as well as joint efforts to improve resilience and recovery planning across Caribbean small island states. This landmark signing builds on the strategic relationship between the CAF and CDB, which began with a joint statement of cooperation in 2013 and signals a deepening of their partnership at a critical moment for the Caribbean. In the news looks at the advancement of the Shell Aphrodite project where Subsea 7 shared its selection for a sizable contract by Shell for the gas project offshore Trinidad and Tobago. This will include the company's procurement for the transportation and installation of subsea equipment at the Aphrodite development located within Block 5A at water depths of up to 290 meters. It's expected that project management and engineering activities have begun at Subsea 7's office in Houston, Texas, with offshore operations planned for 2027. Commenting on the project, Craig Broussard, Senior Vice President for Subsea 7 Gulf of Mexico, shared that engaging with Shell from the outset has been key to building trust and driving efficiencies. This award in Trinidad and Tobago reflects our growing presence in the region, as well as our ongoing commitment to safe, predictable project delivery while supporting local talent and resources. Subsea 7 categorizes a sizable contract as being between $50 million and $150 million. Meanwhile, staying with the energy news emerging from Trinidad and Tobago, 2024 is reporting 4 major producers of natural gas within the Twin Island state. BPTT, Shell, EOG Resources, and Woodside combined are said to have produced about 95% of the country's natural gas. Almost all of this comes from offshore fields, predominantly off the east coast of Trinidad and north coast of Trinidad and Tobago. In 2024, BPTT retained its long-held position as the largest producer of natural gas in TNT and accounted for 46% of natural gas produced. BPTT is majority owned by the British major international energy company BP, but with significant minority shareholding from the Spanish international energy company Repsol. BPTT produced natural gas at an average rate of 1,174 million standard cubic feet per day of the year, or approximately 208,000 barrels of oil equivalent per day. How the Caribbean intends to tackle the U.S. tariffs were the focus of CARICOM's 60th regular meeting of its Council for Trade and Economic Development COTED held in Ghana this week. In addressing trade and foreign affairs ministers present, CARICOM Secretary General Dr. Carlo Barnett urged member states to look at fostering new regional partnerships while building upon existing inter-regional relations.
The recent tariff shocks are a stark reminder of the need for us to diversify our trade and economic relations. We must redouble our efforts to deepen existing and explore new markets and develop new partnerships if the region is to advance its goal of economic growth and sustainable development. As such, the work to address the way forward in trade relations with the United States, the bilateral negotiations with Colombia, and the outstanding certification of the Belize-El Salvador Partial Scope Agreement must be given focused attention. Equally, we need to promote regional production and expand intra-regional trade by updating policies and practices to support entrepreneurship and make trade and business development easier.
Current COTED Chair, Barbados Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade Minister for Barbados, Kerry Simmons, shared that it was his goal to ensure the least amount of barriers affecting trade within the Caribbean community.
2 years ago, we could never have imagined the turmoil that the global trading system and the global economy is confronted with today. Our business community is reeling from cancelled export orders, the impositions of new and unexpected tariffs, and unprecedented uncertainties. The question of whether our exports can enter markets with the least possible barriers and whether imports reach us in a timely, safe, and affordable manner all impact the performance of our economies and determines whether we thrive or struggle as a community.
Outside of facing the tariffs, this year's meeting tackled revising the CET Common External Tariff, as well as industrial policies and procurement procedures. The well-being of regional trade being discussed at this year's COTED in Ghana. Up next, market trends.
We want you to advertise with us. Join us as the premier business magazine and news outlet covering the Caribbean. Contact us today at 868-783-5094.
Welcome back. It's now time for your market trends report. The Jamaican Stock Exchange and the United Nations Development Programme, UNDP, signed a memorandum of understanding to deepen cooperation on sustainable finance and strengthen Jamaica's social development sector. The agreement seeks to promote capacity building for private and social sector actors, particularly those within the Jamaica Social Stock Exchange JSSE, to strengthen their ability to measure impact, improve digital marketing, and enhance monitoring and evaluation practices. It also aims to provide support for the development of Jamaica's social capital market, sustainable finance product innovation, including the development and promotion of green, social, sustainable and sustainability-linked bonds, and the creation of sustainability reporting frameworks aligned with the ESG and ICMA principles. UNDP Country Representative Kishore Kode remarked on the GSC's move toward becoming a green exchange, strengthening the foundation for long-term cooperation on climate finance, ESG integration, and social enterprise development in Jamaica. The MOU formalizes a long-standing partnership aimed at mobilizing private capital to support national development priorities aligned with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals (SDGs). Sticking with the Jamaican Stock Exchange, it reported a sum of 45,652,461 shares, valued at 498,335,526 Jamaican dollars traded for the week. The top three securities traded for the week were Trans-Jamaican Highway Limited, Kingston Wharves Limited, and Wigton Energy Limited. There were advances in 15 stocks in which Margaritaville Turks Limited increased the highest by 13.47%, followed by Sagicor Select Funds Financial Limited at 4.55%. A total of 42 securities declined, with A.S. Bryden and Sons Holdings Limited and Epley Caribbean Property Fund Limited SCC decreasing the most by 15.16% and 13.49% respectively. Overall, a sum of 6 securities traded firm. Moving across to Trinidad and Tobago, where its stock exchange recorded a volume of 516,757 put-through transactions, valued at $5,067,356 traded for the week. Market indices saw the advances in 2 indices, ranging from 0.4% to 3.59%, and the decline in 1 index at 0.61%. The top 3 securities traded for the week was CIBC Caribbean Bank Limited, Trinidad and Tobago National Gas Limited, and First Citizens Group Financial Holdings Limited. A total of 8 securities advanced, in which CIBC Caribbean Bank Limited and Trinidad Cement Limited increased the highest by 7.89% and 4.88% respectively. There were declines in 8 securities as well, where NCB Financial Group Limited fell the most by 4.04%, followed by Agostini Limited at 2.99%. A sum of 9 securities remain unchanged. The Barbados Stock Exchange recorded a volume of 228,111 shares valued at 131,268 Barbadian dollars traded on the regular market for this week. Together, Epley Caribbean Property Value Fund (SCC) and Epley Caribbean Property Development Fund (SCC) captured approximately 54% of the market, with 123,838 shares traded. Barbados Farms Limited also rose to the top, gaining roughly 43% of the market, with 99,222 shares traded for the week. Overall, 2 securities declined, 0 advanced, and 24 remain unchanged. The Eastern Caribbean Securities Exchange market recorded a sum of 20,373 shares valued at 63,630 EC dollars traded for the week. A total of 3 securities were traded for the week, all remaining unchanged. Capturing 98% of the market with 20,033 shares traded was St. Kitts Nevis Anguilla National Bank Limited. The remaining 2% of the market shares traded for the week was split between St. Lucia Electricity Services Limited with 315 shares and Grenada Electricity Services Limited at 25 shares. Watching the multilaterals enter the world of trade in an effort to boost investment in a local entrepreneur. Up next, our This Week in History.
We want you to advertise with us. Join us as the premier business magazine and news outlet covering the Caribbean. Contact us today at 868-783-5094.
The desire for local banks in Ghana back in 1986 to take over foreign banks prompted its government to enact new legislation, one that would forever alter the way banks do business there. On June 14, 1986, the Offshore Banking Act was gazetted in Guyana. This act, numbered 6/1986, was passed by the Fourth Parliament. This bill included provisions related to foreign banks operating in Guyana, requiring them to maintain specific foreign currency balances. The amendment aimed to address issues arising from the takeover of the Royal Bank of Canada Limited and the Chase Manhattan Bank Limited by Guyanese banks with reduced capital. Specifically, the bill proposed to amend the Bank of Ghana Act, Chapter 8502, by inserting a new Section 40A. This new section would require foreign banks in Guyana to maintain a specific portion of their deposits in specified foreign currency as part of the overall deposit requirements. Under the enactment of the Banking Laws Amendment Act 1986, it was stipulated that a bank will not be given a license to operate unless its capital is $510 million or more, and whilst the license is in force, a bank incorporated outside of Guyana shall keep out of its funds outside Guyana and assigned capital for its branch or branches in Guyana, and amount equivalent to 7% of the aggregate of demand and time liabilities arising from banking business in Guyana, or $1 million, whichever is the greater. In this amendment, minimum reserve requirement was increased from 20% to 25%, or lower percent as may be specified by the Bank of Ghana. In the case of a commercial bank incorporated outside of Ghana, it was to be deposited in such foreign currency as the Bank of Ghana may specify from time to time. The move was seen as one geared toward attracting foreign capital and money markets, offering greater freedom of action that might have been possible in the onshore countries of the parent businesses. It was one that became characterized by a controlled financial system with selective credit allocation and interest rates controls. There was a recognized need to improve the regulatory framework. The amendments, by focusing on capital adequacy, were a step towards strengthening prudential oversight of the banking sector. It also reflected Ghana's attempts to both attract new forms of financial activity, offshore banking, and reinforce the stability and structure of its domestic banking system, particularly in the aftermath of the nationalization of foreign banks. The way legislation is needed to regulate one's emerging business sector, critical and similar to what's happening there right now. We take in some short messages now. Stay with us.
We want you to advertise with us. Join us as the premier business magazine and news outlet covering the Caribbean. Contact us today at 868-783-5094.
Well, that's how we wrap up this edition of Carib Money Report. We hope you enjoyed our recap of the CDB conference. Thanks for joining us. I am Kimberly Ram Kalawan. See you next week.